Welcome to the Hope on the Hard Road podcast, where you and your family can find community, find encouragement, and find hope for the road ahead. Speak encouraging words to one another. Build up hope so that you will all be together in this. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. Before we get started today, we want to let you know that we are coming up on our annual Mom's Day Out retreat this May 17th through the 19th. Ladies, this year's retreat is going to be amazing. We're going to the Oaks here in San Diego, where we will enjoy luxury bunkhouse accommodations, yummy chef-created cuisine, an inspiring conference, and community connection with other moms who get it, along with lots of fun free time and rest, and activities include yoga under the stars, fireside chats, and much more. Register now on our website at hopeonthehardroad.org or via the link on our social media. So hurry and grab your weekend retreat or Saturday tickets with a friend, and we'll see you there.
I'm so excited to have Steve Chatman here on the podcast today. Steve is the Vice President at Rising Above Ministries, a nonprofit in Tennessee that is dedicated to lifting up the special needs community. As both a ministry leader and a dad with special needs children, Steve brings a wealth of insight and experience to share with us on the podcast today. This is the first part of a two-part series focused on dads. Let's get started. Well, welcome, Steve. It's really glad you're coming on the podcast today and speaking to us about dads.
Hey, Eric, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited about this, for sure.
Yeah, so give us a little bit of background on you, your family, and your journey with special needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife, Lori, and I, we just celebrated 25 years. So we've been married for 25 years. We are both redheads, so that's always interesting, but we make it work. So 25 years, we have 5 kids, 12, 18, 19, 21, and 28. Our oldest 3 are adopted. And of those 3, 2 of those girls have Down syndrome. And then our oldest actually has had a lot of mental health, emotional challenges just from some early childhood trauma in her birth family. And then our 2 youngest, our 12 and 18, they're our neurotypical kiddos. And but unfortunately, they're the ones that actually inherited my wife and I's genes. So they've got that going against them, I think. So they're like a lethal combination of both of us. But yeah, and then we've got 4 grandkids, and we're figuring out, the whole grandparenting. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my family. And of course, I'm currently on staff at the ministry called Rising Above Ministries here in Middle Tennessee. So it's a little bit of who I am and what my clan looks like.
Well, that's super. As we talk about your daughters in particular, you shared that you all 3 of your oldest daughters are adopted. Mm-hmm. Did you know about them having special needs when you adopted them, or did that come out later? And maybe take us through that process of figuring out what their needs were.
Yeah, so I always tell people our story is unique. We became special needs parents a little bit differently. So we knew both of our daughters with Down syndrome. We knew that they had that diagnosis. One of them was 5 days old, and actually, it was a teenage mom, and she had put the child up for adoption, had a couple that were going to adopt her. Nobody knew that she had Downs until she was born. Mm-hmm. And the young couple was just, they were just shocked and stunned, and they backed out of the adoption. So we had a mutual friend that reached out to us and said, hey, have you guys talked about special needs? We didn't even know what that meant, honestly. When she asked that question, I was like, what does that even mean? Mm-hmm. And then she said, well, this little girl has Down syndrome. Well, I immediately knew I knew several folks that, had a family member, a brother. So we talked about it and said, yeah, we'll do this. So we adopted our first daughter with Downs. And then a little over a year later, we found out about our second daughter who had been born. And, we look back on that and we were just crazy enough to think, oh, well, we've got a year under our belt, yeah, we're old pros now. So we adopted our second daughter. And of course, during this same time, our third daughter, who's actually older than both of them, came to us via our state department, our state children's department here. She was in custody and had been removed from her birth home, and they ended up wanting to place her with us. And, I tell people that story. I mean, literally, we were talking to the agency. Okay, so we've adopted one daughter with Downs, had her for a year. She's a year old now. We find out about a second little child who's at this time is about 6 months old. And literally the caseworker from the agency is in our home interviewing us, and we have agreed to adopt this second child with Down syndrome. And we've signed the paperwork. She leaves our house. I go to check the messages, and it's a caseworker from the state telling us about this other child that they think we're a good match for. And I always tell people, it's at this point in this story that most sane people would have said, hey, we can't do this. We just agreed to adopt our second. But we literally prayed and we adopted. So we adopted two pretty close together. So within 20 months, we went from having no children to having three daughters, two with Down syndrome, and one that we would learn had a lot of serious emotional and some mental health challenges just from early childhood trauma. But we were just crazy like that. And so that's how we started our family. We'd been married probably about 5 years, hadn't been able to get pregnant. And so we began the adoption process. So we don't have that shock and that trauma that a lot of special needs parents have of when you're planning for just a typical normal child, and then your child is born, or maybe you find out during pregnancy that there's serious complications, or like a lot of times with autism, sometimes it's a couple of years in and you start noticing some things aren't right. So we didn't have that story. We knew going into it that we're taking on these children with special needs, and so. We didn't, I used to say we knew what we were doing. Looking back, we had no idea what we were doing, but, we did know we were stepping into this special needs life, and it was going to be different, so we had that knowledge. So we didn't have that shock and have to deal with that grief and walk through that, dreams that are not going to come true now, that kind of thing that I know a lot of special needs parents and dads especially have to deal with. We didn't have that. So, we knew going in, and that's how our family started. Right. And so like our two youngest who are neurotypical, that are biological, that's all they've ever known. Hey, we've got these older sisters that have special needs. And so that's just been our life.
Wow. I mean, it's incredible. You guys just, what I love is that you guys prayed about it and you felt the Lord putting it on your heart to do this. And so you always have that foundation that you don't need to question, did we do the right thing? You did the right thing. You know that you followed, and obedience is always the right thing. But you talk about going from no kids, now all of a sudden you have 3 kids. I mean, and some shock to it. Can you maybe talk about those early years that all of a sudden now you have 3 kids, you're looking at each other, you and your wife, like, how are we going to do this? and what came from there?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changed. I always tell people, your first child changes your life, because it's no longer just you and your spouse. Now you have a child. And then when you have a second one, even with one, you're still pretty flexible. You get 2, and suddenly it's, going anywhere is, you got to really think about, do we have everything we need? Do we got wipes, we got diapers, we got all this stuff. Well, then you put special needs on top of that, and you have to start thinking about a lot of things, like it's, just that whole impromptu stuff kind of, went away, because you really have to think about what you're doing. We were very blessed. I mean, our families, both of our parents, just embraced the choice that we made to adopt special needs kids. I'm sure they thought we were crazy that we took on so much at one time. We didn't spread it out a little bit more, but they were very supportive, and that was very important. But yeah, I mean, so we just kind of threw ourselves into it. We knew nothing. We knew nothing about therapies and early childhood interventions and all those kind of things that we would later learn. There was no manual that was given to us. Like, this is like, you've adopted a child with Down syndrome. Here's what you need to do. There was nothing like that. We're just figuring it out. Now, fortunately, there's a lot of resources out there. And we met some people who, had children with special needs, and they were just a wealth of information, to say, hey, you should check with this organization. So, because, we wanted to give them the best head start we could. I mean, we know there are going to be delays. There's going to be, but we wanted to make sure we gave them the best opportunities that were there. But, and even kids with Down syndrome, there's no two alike. Our girls are so different strengths, and we figured, we learned that along the way. But so it's just, so that's been our story, and we're still learning, we're still learning, still figuring it out. And every season is a new phase. They get older, and, and then you got to figure out what's that going to look like. And we're still doing that. And I'm sure we'll be for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, no, definitely. I just love some of the things you're just sharing. One of the things is, you mentioned about having kids is when you're first married, you realize you're pretty selfish as a person. But when you have a kid in the picture, and then you combine it with two kids, you realize, wait a minute, they're crying. They have needs that have to be met by me. So now you step into that.
And they never ask if it's a convenient time. Is it okay if I cry right now? It's like, well, could you wait till after the game is over? Or maybe let's get through dinner, and then you decide to have a major blowout. It's like, no, they never ask if it's a convenient time.
No, it's constantly laying it down. It's crazy, but it's also humorous too, and I love the laughing about it, because you kind of have to have a sense of humor in life, because it just gets thrown at you a lot of times. So,
For sure.
I get that. One of the things I know, you've been involved in ministry, for number of years, and probably along the way, having kids with special needs, you that's been on your heart as well. But can you talk about maybe like how you were in ministry and what made you transition full time into special needs ministry with Rising Above?
Yeah. So this year marks actually 30 years that I've been in ministry. That was never my goal or ambition growing up. I actually always thought I'd be an attorney, either an attorney or a DJ. That's like, they're not even remotely similar, I know, but yeah, God just called me. I felt early, probably my senior year in college, I really felt a call on my life that it was not law school. And I just began kind of trying to figure that out, what it looked like to walk with God. And so 30 years of being a camp pastor for kids. I've been a youth pastor, student ministry, children's pastor, spent the last 20 years in a local church as the family pastor, working with families, married couples, and just overseeing a myriad of ministries there. Along the way, obviously, we became a special needs family, and recognized and suddenly your eyes are open to, there's this enormous community of special needs families that we probably never even noticed, and so we heard about this thing called Rising Above, and they were having this monthly worship service, sensory-friendly worship service. And I remember I took one of my daughters. I said, let me just go check this out. I'll kind of scout this thing out. I told my wife, so let's not take the whole family. I'll take one of the girls. And we went, and Rising Above was doing this thing, and it was so unique. It was so sweet. It was so incredible, just seeing all these families with individuals from little kids to adult children with special needs, all kinds of disabilities and special needs, and coming together in what a sensory-friendly worship service looked like, and just what they were doing. And as we learned more about this, we got involved with Rising Above, participating in their events and programs as that ministry was growing. And then the couple that started Rising Above, Jeff and Becky Davidson, Jeff and I, he ended up coming on staff at our church. And so we served on staff together, and he and I started a special needs ministry in our church. And so we worked together a lot like that. And of course, Jeff passed away about 5 years ago, and we've always been just, a big part of Rising Above. They would ask me a lot to kind of, be a speaker for the dads events or stuff like that, just things that Jeff probably would have done. And so got to be involved in that. And about a year ago, I had been 20 years at our church and just felt like, okay, God, am I riding this bus another 20 years, or is it time to do something different? I still feel like I have a little gas left in my tank at 53. And so I started praying about that. Had no idea Rising Above at the same time was their board, and Becky was praying about, hey, we think it's time maybe to bring on a guy to kind of head up some of the family ministry and men's ministry stuff. And so they came and said, hey, would you ever think about, you're at the church, would you ever think about this? And I was like, wow, well, as a matter of fact, I'm actually in a season of praying about what the next season looks like. And so from talking, my wife and I in prayer, we just felt like this is what God's doing. It was time to get off that bus and get over here on this bus. It's a life that we live. So, we're not here because we're experts. We're here. I tell people we're here because we're practitioners. We're living this life. we are learning things along the way. But we love this, and so it was just a beautiful God thing, that the timing was great and right. And so, I've actually just completed my first year being full time with Rising Above. So I'm very blessed. There's no question about it, to be able to get to do what I'm doing now. So
that's fantastic. You just watching your heart ready for something change and being launched into something. God's putting that on your heart, and then watching that ministry, the ministry of Rising Above, have a need that you're a perfect fit for. Plus, you knew her husband, so you can kind of step into, the image of what he created, being there and carry it on and build from that, probably with a lot of the vision that he had, knowing him. And so with that, talk to us about one of the things in looking at Rising Above, all the things that you guys do with dads, and supporting and bringing them into the community is just fantastic. Share some of the things that you do and kind of how you built that up and where you see that going.
Yeah, well, for me, obviously, I'm building upon a foundation, a very solid foundation that was laid even after Jeff passed away. His wife Becky stepped up and just done a phenomenal job leading this ministry. Different dads and guys stepped in. At Jeff's funeral, at the graveside, I shared, and I remember looking out and seeing all these special needs dads that he had poured into, and I just challenged them. I said, guys, our leader, has been called home, but we've got to step up, and continue this mission, having no idea that 5 years later, here I'd be stepping into this role. But, so, a lot of the things that we do, for dads, really three main, areas. One is we do a weekly online community group. The whole online thing, really, I guess a lot of that birthed out of COVID. We kind of had to do some things online. And so, but what we discovered was that there are dads all over the country. We have local programming. We have a monthly dads hang time, and it's mostly local dads. It's in person. We get together. We have a meal. We just hang out. We talk. It's a great way to connect. But we found that there's dads all over the country that sometimes are in locations where there's not any type of special needs ministry, and there's not, maybe the churches just don't have a clear vision for this. And so they're pretty isolated. So we have several guys that hop on our weekly community online group from around the country, and connect that way. And then, like I say, we have our monthly dads hang time here in locally in Tennessee, and we'll have dads come together for that once a month. And then we do an annual retreat we call Base Camp, and we do that in October. And it's a weekend where dads, again, from all over the country come. We bring some guys in and usually have some teaching times, good food, campfire, hang out, skeet shooting, just that kind of stuff. A lot of free time just to relax, chill, connect. But just trying to create a space, and in all these venues, whether it's the weekly online group, the monthly gathering, the annual camp, it's to create a space. I always say, try to create spaces and places for dads to voice, vent, and vomit. It's like the dads, we carry a lot of this, and we usually don't express. We're usually not nearly as expressive as our wives are, and it's usually, and honestly, it's not. We probably don't need to be venting that to our wives. We need that safe place, and I think other special needs dads is a great place for that, where we can just voice our life, voice what it looks like with guys who understand. A lot of times your coworkers or your colleagues, they don't get it. And so sometimes what you're trying to explain, they're just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But also to vent, because sometimes it's just frustrating. And then sometimes you got to vomit. Sometimes it's just bad, and you just need to unload that poison, that pain, that hurt, that frustration. I've had dads and I tell them, that you can almost see they're saying things and they're expressing how they feel. And it's almost like, oh man, this really sounds terrible, doesn't it? And I'm like, dude, I get it. It's real. It's real. And you need a safe place to be able to say those things, because, so we try to, provide that, create that kind of space. And plus, and two, a lot of it is just giving dads, like, especially with our hang time and our annual retreat, giving dads a chance to do just some normal guy stuff. Because if you think about it, as special needs dads, a lot of times our lives are about modifications or eliminations. Like, we can't do that. We don't go to the games, or we don't get to go here or do that because we just can't. So we give all that up. But we ourselves are not disabled and have special needs.
Right.
And so sometimes it's just giving these dads a chance to do some normal guy stuff that they don't typically get to in their world anymore. And so just a chance to hang out and, do axe throwing or go play golf or whatever, just those kind of things. And so try to provide dads that kind of space is what we're trying to do with a lot of these, whether it's weekly, monthly, or annually.
Yeah, I love that. I've in my experience working with these dads too, life's beat you up a little bit. And so when you get together, the transparency that can happen and the trust in the group, knowing that, the guy next to you is going through some tough stuff, and, so not being afraid to, as you called it, vomit on what's really going on and share and get that off your chest, and then, rally around each other to keep carrying on. So love that.
And it's you want to do that in a place. You don't want to do that at home. You don't want to do that with your spouse. One guy described it one time. It's like you need lightning rods in your life, because all that electricity is building up, that pain, that hurt, that frustration. And if you need a lightning rod. You need somebody that's safe, where you can just unload all that energy and frustration. And it's not gonna electrocute them. They're just gonna take all that stuff, ground it, and say, okay, good, you got that off your chest. Now where do we go? But if you do that with your wife or your kid, you're gonna electrocute them. You're just gonna unload, and it's gonna hurt them. And so it's good to have that space where, hey, it's okay here. Let it all out. Let's get it out. Let's be real. Let's be honest. And then we can move on. So yeah, but I was like, yeah, don't do that. Don't do that at home. Have that place where you feel safe and can get that stuff out. Yeah, for sure.
That's great stuff.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of our discussion with Steve Chatman. Join us back here next time as we continue our discussion on supporting dads.
Resources and contact information for today's podcast will be included in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share us with others and be sure to follow us so you won't miss an episode. And we'd love to hear from you, so please leave us a comment or rating and connect with us on social media or on our website at hopeonthehardroad.org.